the two films. The teams that we have here with us are very generous to give us their time. We have Melanie Shatzky and Brian and Cassidy for Man Imagine, which was screened earlier this week. As I mentioned, it was part of our opening night. For those among you who maybe didn't see the film, their movie blurs the line between fiction and nonfiction in a delicate and sometimes hallucinatory portrait of 67-year-old Boyd, who survived on the streets for decades and currently lives in the streets of Montreal. And of course, you've just watched Spider's Web. We have Ben and Oliver, cousins. Pleasure to have you guys here. A really radical underground film, a docu-fiction that follows Spider, who is played by Frank Dunster, who is also one of the co-directors. A 56-year-old Toronto man. I'm not going to give you the synopsis. You guys just watched the movie. I think but yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. If you want water, just ask and I'll pass them down as we start. I would actually love to start with a very broad question that is maybe difficult to answer. I would love if you guys could talk about the land you live on, and you could define that in any way that you'd like, and your relationship to it.
Want to hit that off, Chris?
I'm from Toronto, Ontario, and I grew up there in the East End, where Frank is from. I guess probably maybe you could walk there in like 15 minutes to Frank's house in the movie. He's now living further east, as the city does when people lose their housing and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting making this movie because we made it from the West End, so or I was living in the West End while we made it, so to go back to the East End all the time was like really nice. I don't know. Sorry, the land. Describe the land. I
mean, it's like what's your relation? Like, some people I feel like a very strong connection to the space that they live in, and some people don't. And if it's like, yeah, it's just a place I live, I think that's just as legit of an answer, you know?
I guess watching the movie this time, I was thinking like already Toronto. Since we shot this over like 2 years, and since watching it, like already the landscape has changed so much, and there's like buildings that aren't there that are now there, and Frank doesn't live there anymore. So it is crazy how that space just is destroyed and rebuilt so many times. So I guess that was what I was thinking about in terms of my relation to the space of this movie versus the space of Toronto today. So yeah, I guess maybe that's an answer.
Yeah, I think I'm watching it again. I haven't seen it in a year, but it's definitely a Toronto movie. The land, I moved to Toronto in 2012. I love it there. Made a lot of friends. The film, it's made it's only with our friends, So I think community is a lot what you make it. Like, we got to do this only because of the graciousness of everyone, the enthusiasm everyone had. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's our city. It's fun, Toronto's a great place. You meet a lot of different people downtown. So I like Toronto. I think it is home. It's home for me, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons the movie felt so easy, especially watching it now. It's refreshing. It feels like an honest film. I don't know if y'all been to Toronto, but it's good. It's a good one.
Pass it.
Yeah.
Well, so A Man Imagined was shot on the outskirts of Montreal, in and around the city. And if you watched the movie, maybe you were able to spot some locations. I'm originally from upstate New York, or maybe downstate from here, and I kind of grew up in areas where the highways were always sort of cutting through neighborhoods, and the kind of pollution and car culture was really, I can remember when I was a kid watching what was once kind of beautiful kind of rural farmland getting eaten up by development, and a beautiful stretch of road would become a storage center, and just this sense of it being kind of eaten up. And I feel like a lot of places in North America all kind of look the same in a way when you get into these outskirts areas. Melanie's from Montreal. We live and work here together. But for me, there was a familiarity with the outskirts here that there were where I grew up. And so I felt that when we were working with Lloyd, the protagonist of our film, and kind of inhabiting these spaces together and making these sort of vivid scenes in these locales, they felt they didn't feel exotic to me. They felt full of life and full of something that I had a lot of feelings about, but not in an exotic kind of way. So, in terms of relationship to the land, I think that's really all I can say about that.
You know, I'll say this too. Actually, I think it's a Canadian. I think our film's a Canadian film too. You know, Frank's from Calgary. Him and his sisters grew up in Lac Seul, like Northern Ontario. But everyone in the film is like brings their own little slice of what the country means, and in the end, I feel like it's kind of a proud film. Like, everyone loves where they are, and they make the most out of it. And you know, Frank doesn't give a fuck about anything, but there's a few things that he really cares about, and I think like you, because you're talking about the land, you know, and I'm trying to think like, you know, I guess we're all transplants technically. Well, not you were born there, but you know, I do think it's a Canadian film. There's some like motifs that you can pick up when you're watching it that were all accidental, because everyone dressed themselves. Everyone does. There was nothing. Like, we made this movie for like a shoestring, literally, you know. But in the end, when I watch it, I'm like, oh man, this is my. I feel like this is my country. I love it. You know, I'm proud of it, and it's not with no preconceptions. Very natural. You know, oh, you know, this is Toronto, and this is Canada. So that's about it. You know?
I mean, I think a big part of the way that I understand land, and it seems to be you guys too, is that land is often defined by the people who live in it, right? And I mean, you guys have spoken a little bit about it, but I would love if you guys can talk about how you met Frank and how you met Lloyd. Talk a little bit about that relationship and how both of those meetings, or how both of those kind of friendships, or however you want to define it, helped to shape the films.
Me and Frank been friends for like 10, 12 years. I met him in the park downtown where me and my ex at the time and Dorothy and her daughter every Sunday we'd go and hang out. So we've known each other for a long time. We'd go and like smoke dope and watch movies, and he was always talking about making movies, and I was like, whatever, bro. And then I told him, I was like, maybe I can pawn this off of my cousin. I was like, yo, my cousin makes movies. And he was like, oh, yeah. Fuck. And I was like, you want to meet him? He's like, yeah, why not? You know. And then at the time, I was like, y'all can do that. You know, I'm good. Maybe I'll act in it. And then, you know, you get sucked into 2 years. There's a point when you're doing it, like a few months go by, and you go, oh man, we're gonna do this for like fucking 2 years, you know. But that's how we met Frank. Supernatural. I mean, the film is kind of just, it's like three people trying to do something, knowing that they don't really have shit, you know. Three people trying to make something that they want to see. And really, at the end of the day, that's like all of that's just informed by our friendship and how much we can say to someone, that's a horrible idea, or you know, if we can try to make that happen, man, you know, it's just a negotiation.
Yeah, well, we talked about this a little bit after showing our film, but we met Lloyd at a shelter. We initially knew we wanted to make a film about homelessness and spent a year at a shelter volunteering there and getting to know the residents and getting to know their stories, many of which were really interesting. But at the year mark, we met Lloyd, and as soon as we met him, he had such a transcendent quality that we knew that our film had to be about him. And very shortly after we met him, maybe 10 days, 14 days, my sister passed away unexpectedly. And this was February 2020, so right before the entire world shut down. And Lloyd was the first person we saw when we came back to Montreal after my sister passed away, and he was pretty well the only sort of person that we spent a significant amount of time with over the next couple of years. And he became a sort of guide for us during a very difficult time, very tumultuous time, not just grief, but everything having to do with COVID. You know, traversing very difficult terrain means nothing to him, and we could just follow him. He just kind of led us in this sort of spiritual way, and that was sort of the genesis of this project.
I guess my follow-up question too is because obviously I've never met Frank, I've never met Lloyd. Both of these films are radically different, and I would love to know, like especially like speaking with like both groups of filmmakers, I get the sense that the two different people we're talking about, that their personality and their likes and their passions actually help define the rhythm and kind of the structure of the movie. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the film itself ends up reflecting the people? Yeah, you can take that.
I feel like it's quite obvious with Frank. Frank will just do whatever he wants. And that was something like I remember the first time I met Frank, I was like, oh my god, maybe this just won't transpose on camera. Like he just like will turn on and he'll freeze up. But he's like, I mean, I think not much of the first footage we shot made it into the movie, but it was him like playing his broken guitar in front of the TV with the drum set. And that was like the first day, so he's like immediately like doing whatever the fuck he wants. And like the shit where he's like in the bushes lying on his back, I remember it was just, I was like, okay, like cut, and he just kept going. And I was like, okay, I just gotta film this, and it was like 10 minutes of him just like acting by himself. So it was like, as at the beginning of the movie, he didn't really like understand the way we wanted to make the movie, which was like, okay, cut, let's go again. And he'd be like, what do you got it all? And he'd be like, no, you, like we want to see this face over here, and he'd be like, you didn't get that? And then, like, by the end, he was like, okay, I got to get into character. And he would, like, do all this stuff. And then, like, we're watching it. Basically, the process of the movie was we would shoot, and then I would go and edit it. We would bring it. So I'll sit down at Frank's house, smoke some cigarettes, and watch what I edited. And then we would just come up with ideas and, like, spitball things. And everything's completely improvised. So, like, nothing was written down at all. And then we would, come up with ideas and kind of work from there. So, like, by the end of it, it was, like, really refined. But, like, as we're watching it, Frank's, like, pointing out new things. So, even, like, in the lawyer scene, which was, I think, the first real scene we shot, those two lawyer scenes, the one at the beginning and one at the end, which just influenced the whole story immediately. He's just dropping like quotes from like Terminator and like other movies in there, and we'd be watching. He's like, "That's Terminator," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "That's a line from Terminator." And I'm like, "Oh, and you're just dropping lines from other movies?" Like, yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh, that's sick. That's crazy. And then it's crazy. He's a great guy. I wish he was here. Yeah, he's an incredible actor. I wish he was here. Like it's like we had a screening in Toronto, and it's just like a vastly different experience. Like he would just yell at all of you and tell you to stand up and cheer. So.
I don't think I told him we're going to Quebec. He's like, I'm good, bro. Zero interest.
No, he called me the other week and he was like, I might come. And I was like, where are you gonna stay? He's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, like, how are you gonna get there? He's like, well, I'll meet you halfway. And I was like, where's halfway? And that was also a lot of the shooting too, where it was like, some days he just like wouldn't show up, and he'd be like, fuck, like some guy drove in from like Kitchener or whatever for free, and then
Yeah, and so we made this film with the National Film Board of Canada, and the day that we found out that we were greenlit to make the film, we lost Lloyd completely. Like we couldn't find him anywhere in the city. This is a man who has no cell phone, no email, like he's completely off the grid. And we would walk around the streets looking for him. I mean, it was ridiculous. We would look, we would search, we would walk all day sometimes. We knew a kind of...
Here's Brian said the day that we found out. It was a month we couldn't find him after we found out we were greenlit. So
it was
a
period of a month.
Period of a month. We're like, where is he?
Yeah.
How can we find him?
We lost, for a whole month, we couldn't find him at all. I mean, and it was like, Melanie had said part of why we had wanted to maybe do a multi-character thing was to mitigate the risk of, you're taking a real gamble making a single protagonist movie with somebody like Lloyd, who is very committed when he's there, but there's no way to get in touch with him. So we said, this is ridiculous. How are we going to do this? And we would walk around. Maybe after 5 hours, I'd say to Melanie, I was like, even if we find him now, I'm too tired to shoot. Like I can't do this. And then we would find him. We would turn a corner and he'd like be there, and we'd say, "Lloyd, come on, go, let's go. We're gonna go shoot something." We would go shoot something, and we did this for a while, but it took a long time, and eventually things stabilized. He sort of got into a halfway house situation where he was then at a place where we could call and coordinate with him, and that's really why we were able to make the movie. But nevertheless, his life is very rhythmically chaotic. He's here, there, and everywhere. We come from a fiction background also, and so we were making this film kind of like a Italian neo-realist film in a way that, like, actual locations with a real person portraying a version of themselves. But, we acknowledge our own subjectivity and that we wanted to make a movie with our sensitivities. So it was really a collaboration. But the idea of continuity was totally out the window. We couldn't rely on if he had a thing that was going to show up in another scene later, we would be like, okay, cool, bring that thing. He'd be like, oh no, I sold it. Yeah. So I think very organically, the movie found its rhythm through our deep listening and following his rhythms, and that informed what we shot, and it also informed how we accommodated what we shot in the editing. So the editing has a certain rhythm to it, that a discontinuity, like a spirit of discontinuity to it. And I think that just very intuitively, that led to a film that I think is a very accurate portrayal of his spirit and how he processes the world and how he moves through it, through the different seasons.
I'd like to talk a little bit, because you mentioned that your film was made in collaboration with the National Film Board. And one thing that I find very interesting about both of your films is how they come to define different ways of understanding freedom in terms of the kind of lives that you can live as artists, as filmmakers, and the kind of films that you can make working on one hand within institutions, and in Canada, not to like elaborate too much on the idea of land, but a lot of us, the relationship we have with the country is in the everyday life, it's between people, but a lot of the time when we think of Canada or we think of Ontario or Quebec, it's when we're dealing with institutions, like when you have to pay taxes or you have to do healthcare. When you're doing these, it's an institutional thing as well. I would love to talk to both teams really about the choices you're making when you're making a film. For example, when you're going to get grants, you're doing this process and you're like, this is the project that I'm going to do. And also on the other hand, when you're choosing not to do that, or maybe not choosing not to do that, I'd love if you guys could elaborate on those kinds of choices.
We purposely, there was a point where I'll let you talk about this as well, but there was a point where we thought about getting a grant for the movie, and then it was just like, I hate grants and I don't like writing, and then it just felt like putting Frank in a box. That was like, at the beginning, I was asking, just being like, is there an ethical question of like just us being two white guys making a movie with an Indigenous guy? And that was something me and Oliver talked about, and Oliver was just kind of like, well, if that's the purpose of the politic, like, is just to divide, then I think that's stupid. And like, I think when we got to the grant, that was kind of the big thing of being like, you just box Frank into like, what he is externally, or like, yeah, that felt perverse in a way. And I'm happy that we didn't do it that way, because I think it also would have just like influenced everything in a weird way. Like when money gets involved with that, like it feels like then it would have actually become an ethical issue of being like, how do you decide what to pay everybody in this when it's like your life on screen, and then it becomes not fun, and there's like, you have to show up. Because part of this movie too was like, some months you'd just be like, I don't want to do it this month, or like some weeks it would be like, Oliver's like, I'm never doing that again, and I'd be like, please. And then, so it was like a battle to actually make the movie, and then by the end it was like, I was so happy we finished it. But there are many times where I was like, oh, we'll just shelve it, and like maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's a little short film. And so like, it was good to have that freedom too, and also give that Frank that freedom, so that he wasn't like felt any pressure in that way. I don't know if that was your Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film's about Frank's spirit, like joy and sadness and pain, and I love what Ben did with the end of the movie because I think Frank has like a revelation. You know, he's accountable, and it's through that accountability he realizes he can actually transcend his own situation in a way. And I mean that's why I ended up loving the movie. While we were making, I didn't know we were gonna get there. I think that's shout out to like Ben and Spider because they did all that work. Like Ben said, I got frustrated just because it was exhausting. But I only bring that up because, you know, the way we made the film let that come out, and there is a sensibility in making a film with DIY, like kids who, you know, make a game when they have nothing, or you build something out of, you know, you build a tree fort in the woods, and obviously you can carry that through into practice of making it as you get older because there's something beautiful in that and it will affect the outcome. But another thing was like I mean I just never wanted to make this film or really anything if I had to like get involved in this patronage system that I think the granting is. And Ben said early on, I was like, listen, man, you want to do it, you can do it. Like, I'm not going to be a Nazi here, but I think it's going to fuck this movie up, to be frank. And he was like, man, it's like, you got to write, and we're not fraudsters. Like, I don't find the act of making fraudulent. I'm not going to write some dumb shit. Excuse my language, but like, I'm not going to box this movie in. And I'm not going to like, we're not going to be fraudulent about it to get to an end. We don't need the money. I mean, I think every time you make something, you should elevate the spirit. And I think there's many ways to do that. And I think we put a lot of work, me, Frank, and Ben, in another way, in a slower way, in a way that was more genuine. And that if there was like that was the only political act of the movie. Beyond that, the film is about like overcoming and joy and sadness, you know. And I think that's why it's a nice movie to watch. I mean, people can it could be received in any way. Like you could see the grant you could write for this movie, but man, we didn't want to do that. It was just ridiculous. It wouldn't have been what the movie's about, you know. And then the whole process would have been, I think I would have been ashamed by it, you know. So I guess those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and well, for us, obviously, we had to write a proposal for the National Film Board, and you know, we were frank in our proposal that and really simple that our point is really to create empathy for people living on the fringes and for people who are routinely ignored. And we've made a career out of making films about people who are routinely ignored. So we have a track record of being respectful towards people. And I felt we were, at first there were, you know, a number of questions from the film board about, you know, ethics, how are you going to do this? But we had a wonderful producer who was, before he went into producing, he was an artist. And I think this is the best kind of producer that you can align yourself with someone who sort of understands your vision and understands the sort of artistic impulse to want to make something. And it's not just about proving a point, but inhabiting a world, bringing something forth. And so we were very lucky with who we were paired up with, that he cleared the way for us.
I'm just curious because not having written a grant to do a documentary, when you're saying that they're asking you ethical questions, like what kind of questions would they ask you?
Oh boy, it was a while ago now, but just how we're going to portray this person. If the person tells us anything that's kind of troubling, how are we going to handle that? Do you remember anything else that we were asked?
Not really. I mean, there was a question at a point about paying. We decided we wanted to pay Lloyd for his participation because he was working as an actor portraying himself, and we wanted to, as a fair gesture, to pay him. And there was a question. We brought that up with our producer because in traditional documentary there are ethics around paying subjects as if you're sort of, you're influencing their decisions, but the conversations we have with our producers, that it's not reportage. We're not documentarians per se. Yes, it's rooted in the real, but it's a different kind of cinematic gesture. And so we wound up having a budget to pay Lloyd for his participation. Yeah, I mean, we just, I guess we, early on, we just had to be articulate about what we were doing and how, and we just had a great producer who was able to run interference if he needed to with people that may have done so. I don't know who those people were or if they even existed, but like Melanie said too. I mean, we have a track record too, so that helped. It wasn't our first time out of the gate and working with, and I just think we were able to express, what was essential for us to do. I mean, we wouldn't have made the movie if we couldn't have made the movie we wanted to make. We would have just said thank you, but no thank you. So it was, I think, with that spirit, there were no problems.
I mean, this is another pretty general question, but I think it applies to both of your films. It's the idea that, or in general, can filmmaking or art or movies be in service of liberation, whatever that means, just like freedom to live the life you want to live, or freedom to like get out of the shackles of oppression, to break away from expectations. You can interpret it the way you'd like.
I think there's a lot of pressure on art to be to like answer a lot of political questions that we have in culture. We're like a very media based culture. We're all online all the time, so we like kind of throw our political endeavors there. And I don't think past like building empathy, or maybe not even empathy, but just like awareness and just the actual experience of making the movie is political, but the viewing of the movie is not, so that's where it becomes a very odd art form in my opinion. But I don't know if it really, like, I'm not at odds with that, just with technology now. Like, I don't know if like art has any bearing on the real world anymore, if it just is the real world and like we're all insane. Yeah, I don't know. I find it kind of a depressing time in terms of that. Like, just like revolutionary action has to be so specific now, and when it's an experimentation, always, life's an experimental thing. So I don't know if that's rambling.
I think as an artist, you desire absolute freedom. I think that's the pursuit of art. I think if you do it well, or if that's kind of what you're going for, I think, I mean, liberty is a really interesting word. I think people define that in a lot of different ways these days, but liberty is kind of like it's kind of like a metaphysical question more than just like a literal fact, and so I think through making art you can get there, I think that's probably the only valid part of making art. That's the only reason it would be worthy. And I do think that, I mean, filmmaking is new to me. I have an art practice, so a lot of that I do myself. With film, it's like you're entering this project with other people, and I think anytime you have a bunch of people, like three different persons' conceptions of what liberty are going to be different things. They're going to want a different product, because your beliefs inevitably will affect the outcome. But I think something me and Ben talked about. Even Ben curbs me sometimes. Because in my own practice, it's just me. I'm only accountable for myself, and I get to show what it is and I get to define it in every single way. But in the film, we're not. You think big and you act local. That's something my friend says, and I think metaphorically, if you think about even the film we made here today, there's all this stuff to think about. But that what we actually end up doing should be very simple, because it should be relatable to everyone who sees it. And then as the years go by, I think if it's a good film, if it has impact, then it'll repeatedly bring up questions when you watch it, or you'll feel a universal like attraction to the character, or what he went through, or the fact that that maybe anyone can do what he did. So I think you can start big, but yeah, you think about it. It shouldn't, it affects the end result. But I think if you do it well, like you can inspire like freedom, true freedom. Not what freedom is at the time or the week or what year. And I even, these questions they ask you when you do the granting. I mean, I think, like, if we're answering those questions, we're not making this film, because, like, the technocratic way of understanding a relationship with someone, like, how am I gonna write that down in a grant? It's preposterous, And we're all very different people. So we didn't do that because you go, well, we can't make this film if we do it in the way that I guess you can get money for. So it's like, I'm like, bro, we're not doing that. There's no way. So I think if you have your own understanding what liberty is and what freedom is, especially as a maker, you can do whatever you want, you know, and it can be impactful, I think.
Well, I mean, I admire that you just went out and made it and didn't ask for permission, or I think that spirit as a filmmaker has always been important, but it's increasingly so. This, you know, this just the feeling that if you can, you're gonna go out and you're gonna go make it. You know, even if it means it's gonna be small and handheld or whatever that means for each project. I think it's an important spirit, and you know that's the spirit we carry, and then that creates a feeling of, you know, you're sort of a moving train. You're doing it, and then that's attractive to people, and then maybe people come on and help out. So I think it is important to have that spirit, that you're not going to try and be hyper articulate about what it is you want to make before you've even made it, and then wait for 6 to 8 months to find out if someone tells you can make it when maybe your head is somewhere else. It's good, I think, to go and do that, and there's something really admirable about that. No, I mean, we still believe in new images and new sensations, and that there's, you know, we do live in an age of hyperabundance, and where many things have been seen, or we have access to the entire history of all media at our fingertips. So the challenge of bringing new sensations to viewers there's something to that. I still believe it's possible. I believe we leave the idea of the echo chamber to social media. If you want to go and have your own beliefs reinforced, there are plenty of cheaper outlets to go do that online. But I think that the cinema is a place that should get you a little bit out of your comfort zone, and to where we should be pushing and be pushed. And I find that exciting as an artist. So I still believe it's possible.
One thing that I find very interesting about a lot of the conversations in both of the films is, I think quite directly, like in Spider's Web, you have Frank talking about hell in a way, and to me, both films, and I think a lot of contemporary movies in general, they do feel like they're kind of in a post-apocalyptic setting, and I think it's because maybe we're living in a post-apocalyptic world in a way. But if you look at like some histories of some ideas of conceptualism, like futurism, indigenous futurism, whatever, they believe that the apocalypse has happened or is ongoing, but through that there's a mode of transformation. And despite the fact that both of these films are portraying things that are very dark, for me they are both films that still have so much love and so much kind of a sense of community and so much sense of like space, but space in a way that I mean in like a very loving way. How do you kind of reconcile this destruction and this despair with this possibility for hope?
Melanie has the answer.
I actually think our film is very hopeful. I think our film is, I don't know, born of a place of love. And, you know, Lloyd has a traumatic past, but, you know, they're very familiar images of people experiencing homelessness, mental illness, and we didn't want to go that route. We wanted to show, I don't know, something that was sort of beautiful and gentle, surprising. I don't know, that was our experience with this particular person. So, I don't know, for us, it was never lacking in any hope.
I think Frank's like a very happy guy. He's kind of having the time of his life, you know? And that's also like, depending on how you see Frank's circumstances in the movie. Like, I remember the first screening we had of this, like, I came out, I was like, that's fucking depressing, you know? And then this one, I was like, man, this is so, like, happy. and like Frank's a really happy guy, and like the circumstances of his life are like disturbing and awful sometimes, but I don't know. I think that's like what Oliver was saying about like the soul and like the faith he has in the world without even like it's just everything about him is like the faith in being alive, and like that's like I don't know. He's like a punk rock in its essence. Like, he's like unstoppable, and you know he like fight people and do whatever he wants, and I really respect that. Like I think that's a dying breed. I think we're like thinking a lot about things now. And that's also where I'm like, if he was here, he would just yell at us, and, like, tell us to like clap over and over again. And like that to me, I'm like, that's it. That's kind of movies, you know. Like sometimes like the intellectualization of it like becomes like a burden. So
Yeah, I guess you're right. Like Toronto kind of becomes like a weird psychosis landscape in a bit in the movie. But I find it really redemptive. I mean, that last scene to me like is just it's like the definition of hope, and I love that he figures it all out by himself, you know, which I mean I guess that's really the only way it could have happened because of his individualism is so strong. But I think you know like there's like all the bad things that happen to Frank in the movie are real, like they're his own fault, you know, and Frank's pain and his torture, what you see in the film, which is like Ben said, there's no script. Everyone's bringing their own juice to this film. It's super real. It's his own past. He knows he has to reckon with it every day. The demon in that movie, like you know, Frank came up with that idea because he like Frank wanted to make a Michael Bay movie. You know, Ben wanted to make like an art. Me and Ben are artists, so we're like, no, we're gonna have like meet in the middle on this one. And but I, you know, like I practically want to stand up at the end and like I want to slap him on the back and be like, fuck yeah, man. He's going to jail. He's going to prison. He's got new clothes on. Like that. I love the city hall downtown. It's such a great looking building. He's like walking into this like metaphor for wherever he's gonna go, and he's just, but he could not be a man more in control of his mind state and his passion. And so you know it's a movie really about one man's world, but I mean I think that the end just completely saves it, because yeah it's kind of depressing. Some people came out and they were all like fucking like you know, because his alcoholism is gnarly. I mean the movie was like I wanted to kill this motherfucker sometimes, you know. I still do. But yeah, it really something really good turned out of it, you know.
he beat the case.
He like didn't beat the case, but you're like, damn, he beat the case, you know. And in real life, he beat the case. Actually, it's based off a real thing. He was blacked out in the subway. He pushed someone in front of a subway.
Oh wow!
And the other guy didn't remember. He was blacked out too. It was like if someone pushes someone on the subway and no one sees it. I was like, and if no one, I was like, bro, if no one remembered it, it didn't even really happen, you know. Yeah. But they just gave him probation or something. Which I like that line when he's like, man, they're letting people out all the time, because it's true. These people, no one's going to jail. And I was like, man, awesome. You're my boy, so I'm pretty hyped about that. But.
You were in the zone. It was okay. I mean, I guess that kind of segues into what I want to ask next. Is like, how do you both balance like this kind of the elements of fiction and nonfiction? Because a lot of it is improvised, and what I love about movies that are improvised in general is that even if people are kind of going through the lines, it ends up being like almost like a documentary of people going through lines. I would love to have both of your takes on kind of blending these different elements, these fictional elements and this documentary, and to create something new. You guys
want to go first?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think Melanie and I have always been interested in this sort of genre fluidity between fiction and I'm hesitant to even say documentary. It's more, I mean, we're interested in actual places and real people and authentic gestures, real faces, people's the energy that they give off and maybe the stories they have as a sort of springboard that then activates us, and that sparks our imagination. And so we really kind of feed off of that aspect of the real, but then the part of us that wants to sort of make a more constructed thing that accommodates our responses and our ideas really kind of takes over. So that sort of push-pull between those two things has always been really seductive for us, and interesting. And I think that it dovetailed really nicely with this collaboration with the protagonist Lloyd of our film, because it allowed him to kind of opt in at all times to each and every scene that we did together. So it would not be uncommon for us to do many takes of the same thing, whether it was a small gesture like put your hand up against the glass. He was actually a very precise guy. He's able to, like, if we said no, just bring it down a little bit and to the right a little bit, and he was very, very precise in how he could do things. It was pretty amazing. But I think that collaborative aspect was it was a real confidence building thing for him, and it just for us it was just a pleasure. I mean, we spent a year. We were not interested in. I mean, it was almost like making a film around homelessness is almost. I think of like the film The Five Obstructions. It's almost like, oh, how do you do that with all the cliches and the images of pity and overly familiar tropes? How do you do that? And so the first half of the film was really about what we didn't want to do, and then we would discover how we could access and enter this with him, with Lloyd, and so the fiction mode really allowed him. He felt great every day. We'd come back, and he just knew he could do no wrong, because we spent a year essentially casting. And we probably met over 100 people, hundreds of people, before we decided that Lloyd would really be the center of the film. And I think he was aware that we felt that there was something really special in him, and that really that really fueled his performance. And so I think that relationship, rather than just being a sort of fly on the wall and just sort of creeping around and hiding behind bushes and watching somebody, or being like, you do your thing, man, and we're just going to roll for like and gather 300 hours of footage and find it in the editing. Like, this was very much the opposite of that, and it was the results I think show on screen, and I think they were very appropriate for what it would be like to work with someone like Lloyd in his background.
We did roll for 300 hours.
Whatever works.
Yeah. I mean, Frank would just say whatever. So that was like, it was very apparent on the first day of, like, I think it was the first day was the lawyer scene. So basically every day you'd be like, show up with your red shirt and your black shirt, because he only wears 2 colors. And then we'd shoot one scene for the beginning of the movie, one scene for the end of the movie. And like the first thing, it was just like, okay, we immediately have a story. This is sick. But he would take it to places and like go crazy with it. And the second scene was the lawyer scene, where he like sits down and has a beer with his lawyer in the middle of the movie, and the lawyer gets a little tipsy.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, I love
It's
that.
hilarious.
Scene. Yeah,
you're a really good actor too.
Yeah, incredible actor. He was drunk. He cannot hold his liquor. Yeah. But but that one was like, I think those 2 scenes were where we were trying to blur the docu-fiction, or I was trying to pushing for a more docu thing at that point, and then I just kind of let it go, because Frank would just do whatever he wanted. And yeah, so that one I think I was like, talk about your wife, because you talk about his ex-wife and his kids, and talk about meeting her. And then he brought up the 8-ball jacket. I was like, the 8-ball jacket's sick, so we ordered one online. And then we shoot stuff with that, and he's like, what if I'm a demon? And you're like, okay, it's sick, let's do that. And I'd be like, what do you dream about? He's like, I used to dream that I was being chased by tornadoes. So you'd be like, okay, let's shoot that, whatever that means. And like, we don't have $1 million, so it's gonna be a leaf blower, a ravine. But that being said, like, things like the like Oliver said, is like we all 3 had our different conceptions of some things. Like that bar scene, like that was the only time we rented anything. We paid $300 that bar. We were like, we got to do it in the morning so Frank's not like fucked up. He shows up and he's like stayed up all night. We're like, perfect. And he's just blackout. And the whole time he's just like, every time I'm like, okay, cut. He's like, you're a fucking bitch. And I'm like, man, like let's just keep shooting. And he'd be like, fuck you. You don't tell me what to do. And I'm like, okay. But then that scene was one where I was like, I don't know if we should have that in the movie. Like this just seems like a waste of time. And then watching it, and I was pushing for him to be like, I wanted him to just expose what he needed, to be like, I need you to come to court, and he would never do it. He'd be like, I'm not saying that. And then in the edit, I was like, man, your instincts, it's like working with like Tom Cruise, in my opinion. I'm like,
That's what it was like.
yeah, he's like fucking like, you know, insane, but you're watching, you're like, honestly, you're right. Like, you shouldn't have said that. And like your instincts as an actor were right, and I was wrong. And then that was one too where he called me the day after. He's like, how was shooting? And I was like, it was pretty shitty. He's like, I don't remember any of it. I was like, yeah, okay. But that being said, yeah, he just goes crazy with it. He's a fucking sick actor. He's like a legend. Yeah.
I can't remember the original question.
Documentary and fiction.
Oh, right. Well, I'd give you a lot of credit for how we made it. You know, I think because we were all friends, we had the ability to make something like what Ben wanted to make, and him and Frank really worked on the story like for 2 years. But I think it was a boon for us that we just had known each other for a long time, so it was very easy. And it, in the same way, you know, we were talking about art earlier, like I like the movie because like I said, I'm not a filmmaker. Now after doing this, I told Ben like, don't ever ask me to do this again. But mostly because I find it so complicated, you know. But it was, I think, it was easy for, in a way. It was easy. It was easy for us to do because we kind of just, it was a very natural thing, you know. Doesn't mean it's not a lot of hard work, but we didn't. Like I like that it's a docufiction, you know, because you get to say to someone, listen, don't like anyone. This is like a very egalitarian thing we're doing. You can do whatever you want, you know. The scene is yours. The lines are yours. Is there something you'd want to be? Do you want to be a certain way? And that's fun. I find that really enjoyable. And to me, that more is close to like a different kind of art practice. So I'm happy that you kind of made us stick to that. You know, even though sometimes I was like, dude, we gotta write you lines because I'm about to kill you. You know, like just say these 3 lines, and you look at you and be like, not doing it.
I think it's going to be my last question, and maybe we can all kind of continue at the party and have fun and continue the conversation if we want. But kind of ending on that hopeful note and the idea of art and practice, I'd love if you guys could describe the conditions that you'd like to see the world in which kind of anyone can create art, because it's like, I think you've already done it. Like both of these films are about people who make art at any cost, but what do you think needs to change, or what doesn't need to change, or what does the world look like where we all have time to be artists, or what does that require?
Man, I just want some money. I'm very broke, and I work on set for a living, so I don't want to do that anymore. And oh man, I don't know. I'd like to keep making things like this. We already started making something else, and even though he doesn't want to now.
No.
And then yeah, but I don't know. I'll keep making things regardless. I don't really care. I think that to me is like what keeps it alive. Like I just love this shit, so I'll do it no matter what. And
yeah, I don't think I want more people to be making work that already make it's good crowd the field.
I agree.
There's already too much. I think. No, I mean, you know,
Well, actually,
I mean, it's hyper abundance thing. There's a lot out there. There's a lot to sift through, which can be exciting, and it actually puts more on. Yeah, it must be good for curators, because we need more, you know, curatorial voices in this age of hyperabundance to really help to sort of shape these programs and to bring films together, like, you know, like the way you guys are doing here, and bring things in dialogue with one another. So I feel like the curatorial voice is really it's an interesting time for the curatorial voice because of all of this, all of these gestures that are out there, all these films that are being made, and yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely live like there's a lot of images, a lot of screens these days. So again, film just bonkers to me. You know, I find it a very hard thing to do. I would, you know, it's gonna sound a bit brash, but you know, I think the making art is something available to everyone, and it's beautiful. Brian painting in the film, like you understand exactly why he's doing it. You know, but I think art and being an artist and making film is kind of a non-egalitarian practice. I mean, you're trying to say something, you're trying to move thought in a certain way, you know, you're trying to get people to think about things maybe they don't, you try to show someone something they never thought about before. I think that kind of butts up against nowadays, the barrier to do anything is very low. And I think that's happened for a variety of reasons, but you know, just to bring it back to the movie, I mean, we did something with very tight constraints, with like the ability for it to go anywhere, and so I think the duality that it worked for what we were doing, you know, but for like a very specific set of reasons, and very specific set of reasons that people wanted to participate in it, you know, so I think like, yeah, everyone's an artist. It's like, I don't know, you know, art is barely useful sometimes, to be honest. And sorry.
I'd actually like to end it by saying, like, I love useless art. I think we should have a lot of it. And thank you guys so much for participating. I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to say, or there's anything else. If not, we can go drink and party and channel vibes.
As you wish. I mean, yeah, we could do that, or I don't have anything else to say, really. I mean, unless people have. Well, you're not doing questions and answers. No.
Do you guys
That's
want
not the format here. That's not. No, everybody says.
We can-
It's just been long.
Let's give it up one more time, guys.